In the video I made about Dragon Ball Z versus Dragon Ball Z Kai, it was all about whether the remix was better than the original. And if you watched that video, then you know where I stand on that discussion. But this one is just a little different. Now I'm gonna be comparing the same story, but just at two different points in time. And for as long as I've had these series finished, it's kinda crazy that I never really sat down and determined which was better to me. So that's what I'll do in this video. I'll finally make my choice. Do I like the story of Goku becoming a man, or the story of Goku as the man? So in the Z vs Kai video, I talked about the differences in the censorship, voice acting, pacing, soundtracks, and manga accuracy. But for these two series, I don't have to do that. I can analyze and compare them as stories, and there's no better place to start than at the very beginning. Dragon Ball opens with us watching a kid with a tail breaking laws with his bare hands, killing a giant fish with one kick, and talking to a ball that he calls Grandpa. Those few moments tell us two things about this individual that will never change. He's abnormally strong for a human, and he's a little different. I think Akira Toriyama did a magnificent job of introducing the iconic character and not forgetting the groundwork he laid in the first chapters, because all throughout Dragon Ball, Toriyama hints at Goku being more than just an ordinary human. Yes, he looked human for the most part, but his tail, superhuman strength, and giant ape form were more than enough hints that Goku may not have been human, but it was never explicitly said. That's why Dragon Ball Z's exposition is such an impactful one, because not only does it expand the world of Dragon Ball into space, but it also confirms any suspicion surrounding Goku's origins while simultaneously presenting a new threat that you would think would bring about a moral dilemma for Goku. In Dragon Ball, Goku went through numerous life-threatening battles and experienced a level of kindness and friendship that allowed him to build bonds that were ironclad. These bonds were so strong that when it came to joining his only brother or saving those friends, it was an easy choice. And to me, that's a point I give to Dragon Ball. That series was considerably better when it came to developing a character's relationships within the story. We saw Goku and Krillin's competitive relationship blossom into a brotherhood. Tien and Yamcha went from hating each other to developing a friendly rivalry, and one of my favorite aspects when it comes to interpersonal relationships in Dragon Ball was how everyone respected Master Roshi. Before we got Super Saiyans and androids, Master Roshi was one of the strongest fighters on Earth with the wisdom that most of the main cast admired. Yeah, he had the pervy moments, but when things got serious, Master Roshi was a guide for the Z fighters. I don't like that it seems that as the stronger the characters got, the less his words meant. I understand that he couldn't really be on the front lines anymore, but for the majority of Dragon Ball Z, he was relegated to having only his pervy moments being highlighted. So although I think Dragon Ball was better at developing relationships, Dragon Ball Z was better when it came to overall character development. I think it's actually fair to say that Dragon Ball Z was much better. Tien, Yamcha, Krillin, Bulma, and even Chaozu to a lesser extent all grew as characters during their time in Dragon Ball. But does their development even compare to the big three of character development in Dragon Ball Z? Who's the big three, you ask? Well, that's Gohan, Piccolo, and Vegeta. Gohan is one of my favorite coming-of-age stories ever, even though he was still a kid. Piccolo in the first arc of Dragon Ball Z is an example of one of the fastest character changes I've ever seen, yet it still doesn't feel rushed or forced in the slightest. And although he doesn't radically change for the rest of Dragon Ball Z, he plays so many different roles in the story and always fits and contributes in a positive way. Then there's Vegeta. And I just made a video about why I think Vegeta is the best character in Dragon Ball Z because of his growth. Those three beat Dragon Ball's character development alone. But Dragon Ball Z has some sleepers too, like Mr. Satan. I don't really hear people talk about how much he grew as a character. I mean, who would have thought that when he was introduced against Cell that he would end up being a mainstay in the franchise? And even more than that, he was one of the bigger reasons that Buu was defeated. In front of most of the world, he was still an arrogant showman, but he truly changed for the better by the end of the series. Now, when it comes to comparing individual sagas to each other, I don't know if that's a close argument either. I think the best that Dragon Ball had to offer is the Demon King Piccolo saga, whereas the best in Dragon Ball Z is the Frieza saga, and I also think the Saiyan saga is better than the Demon King Piccolo saga as well, but that's just individually. The original Dragon Ball transitions seamlessly between each saga from start to finish. That's something I value a lot, and I think that quality is an important one to have when telling the story of a boy becoming a man. I've stated before that part of the reason why I enjoy the first 2 sections of Z so much is because of how seamless the transitioning is. The Saiyan saga builds off of the story of Goku landing on Earth, the Frieza saga builds off of why Goku had to land on Earth, the Android saga, although disconnected from the Frieza saga, it does build off of Goku's encounter with the Red Ribbon Army in Dragon Ball, but the Buu saga doesn't have any deep roots in the Dragon Ball world. When I was younger and read about how Buu's pod came to be on Earth, I always thought that somewhere down the line it was going to be related to something Goku had done a long time ago, but I was wrong. That's another contributing factor to that arc's extreme lack of direction. And then if we compare villains, Dragon Ball Z wins here, but for most of Dragon Ball, I don't think there was an emphasis on creating truly compelling villains. The first 2/3 of Dragon Ball is an action-adventure comedy. You knew that most of the fights Goku had weren't life or death, and I think that's why there were so many tournaments in Dragon Ball. It did change with the introduction of Piccolo, but even then, Goku only had one life or death fight in Dragon Ball as a child. I can't say this for a fact, but I'd like to think that part of the reason Dragon Ball was so lighthearted at times was due to the fact that Goku was a small child. Once he grew in stature, almost all of his fights were life or death. That's where characters like Vegeta, Nappa, Frieza, Cell, and even Buu really shine because although they were evil like the villains in Dragon Ball, they could act on their evil nature to the highest degree. So if it wasn't clear, I do prefer Z's villains over Dragon Ball's, but I don't think Toriyama meant to write many of the villains in Dragon Ball with great depth. Now I was going to try to compare the two series in terms of excitement, and I think it's pretty clear which would win in that department, but I gotta give Toriyama a lot of praise for keeping me entertained in a story that for the most part was based around simple martial arts. I was locked in on the 21st and 22nd World Tournaments knowing that no one would die. So Dragon Ball has character relationships, fluidity, and comedy on its side, whereas Dragon Ball Z has character development, individual arcs, villains, and high stakes. That's 4-3 in favor of Dragon Ball Z, but I don't think I can just leave it there. Dragon Ball Z doesn't work nearly as well without Dragon Ball. And it's so funny because for a while I didn't know that at all. I watched all of Dragon Ball Z before Dragon Ball, so I didn't know about Goku's childhood and how long people question Goku's true lineage. I didn't know about Piccolo before Z and how his father, being one of the Earth's greatest threats, pressured him into being something he didn't truly want to be. I didn't know that the story of Dragon Ball was solely on Earth. I didn't know that I could view the story of Dragon Ball in such a different context but still enjoy it so much. I said it at the beginning. Dragon Ball was a story of Goku becoming a man, and Dragon Ball Z was a story of Goku as the man. So which series did a better job of giving us those journeys for Goku? Which do I give more credit to for the best time skip I've ever seen? Dragon Ball for the perfect setup, or Dragon Ball Z for the outstanding job at taking the baton and running with it? Me? I go with Dragon Ball Z. I'm a fan of high stakes. I like when I'm reading a story and I know a character has everything on the line. I like seeing what a character would do with their backs against the wall, and I think you get that more when a situation is life or death. So if you're a fan of high stakes too, I think you will probably agree with me, but it is a lot closer than people think. But that's how I feel about the two series. What do you think? Which is better between these two and why? Let me know down in the comments. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video or any of the other ones you've seen on my channel, please leave a like and subscribe. We're on the road to 5,000 subscribers and everyone counts. Again, this is BigTune and thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one.